If you have an interest in horses and love learning more about horses, the horse industry, teaching, or even managing your own horse business, then you're in the right place. We would love you to join us on our mission, which is to improve the lives of horses around the world through the education of riders, handlers, and trainers. So get comfortable, listen in, and enjoy.
We've got Brendan Bergin back today on Horse Chats as a repeat guest. He's been a very welcome repeat guest, always giving us lots and lots of knowledge for coaching and teaching within the horse industry. How are you today, Brendan?
Yeah, pretty good.
Now, Brendan, we've got you awake pretty early, haven't we? You know, I'm sort of going onto the afternoon here, and we've got you fairly early in the morning. What time is it over there?
It's 5 a.m. It's like we'd be on the way to the event now. At this stage, we were eventing. Yes.
Okay. So you've got some a little bit of spare time, and great that you've taken some time to chat to us. Now, before we get started on that, I just want to go over the mission, just remind everyone about the mission of International Horse College. And the mission is to improve the welfare of horses around the world through the safe education of their riders, handlers and trainers. Have a look at the wide variety of equine courses now at internationalhorsecollege.com, registered training organisation 31352. Now, today, Brendan, I know that you do teach quite a lot of children. We're talking about 10 ways to help children learn effectively. Is that right?
That's right. That's right.
Now, you do teach quite a few. And what do you find? Do you find that children are having, I know that sometimes you see instructors and they're just not communicating well with the kids, and the kids can't learn if they're not being communicated with correctly.
Yeah. I suppose the thing I always think about with kids is that it's running that balance between delivering enough technical content that makes how they progress.
Yep.
Whereas the big thing, like when I started teaching, was you have to sell teaching. So one of my very first place I worked said you have to sell the teaching. So you have to make sure they're safe. You have to make sure they enjoy it.
Yep.
You have to make sure they learn. And you have to make sure they love it.
Yes.
And it has to be in that order, because if you don't have it in that order, you're absolutely stuffed with teaching kids, because they have very little attention span, especially when they're on the younger end of the spectrum.
Yep.
They have no idea about their own mortality, so you've got to make sure that you keep them safe without scaring them to death.
Yep.
It's like there's nothing worse to say to a child than, oh, don't do that or you'll fall off. It's got to be, oh, don't do that or you'll lose your balance or something like that, because you can traumatize them very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose I absolutely love teaching kids most of the time, as long as they want to be there, because there's some parents have this great idea that their kids should learn to ride, but the kid doesn't want to be there. So I love teaching them as long as they want to be there.
Yeah, and I think that's what I love so much about riding. You know, people want to be there. Generally, they want to be there, whereas, as a school teacher, it's like, well, you've just got to come in here and you're not allowed to leave until the bell goes in the afternoon, you've just got to cop
Exactly.
it. Yeah. Now, you've got a difference here between coaching and teaching. If you say coach them and don't teach them, how would you explain that a little bit more? Because we talk about, and there's a lot of, I think there's the language of it all, the coaching and the teaching and the instructing and basically the education of it all. But if you're saying coach them, don't teach them, tell us a little bit more about that.
I suppose, like, one of the big things is that a riding instructor, riding coach has to wear different hats at different times. Mm-hmm. So my goal is always to coach. So the idea of coaching being developing what they have and extrapolating it out. So the first thing I'll do when I teach even a person who's never ridden before for the first time is I'll ask them a question. How do you think you do this, or how do you think you do that? Like, remember that a horse is like riding a bike. So if you can get them into the way of thinking that they understand something already, it can help. So, like, for example, ask them, how do you stop your bike? Oh, I pull the brakes. So how do you think you stop the horse? Okay, I pull the reins. When you stop the bike, do you pull the reins hard or do you pull them gently? Oh, you pull them gently, because if you pull them too hard, you end up flipping over the handlebars. So if you start off teaching them with that way of thinking, with that coaching mentality, it gets them engaged much quicker. Whereas lots of time you'll see people starting off with kids and they're like, okay, to stop, you do this, to go, you do this, do this, you do this. And, they don't remember. There's an old saying, tell me I'll forget, teach me I won't remember, and involve me and I'll learn. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's exactly the same thing. And people say, oh, you can't do that in a group. You absolutely can do it in a group. It just means that you've got to go. If you've got 5 in the group, you've got to have one question for everybody so everyone feels involved. So I suppose I'm massively into the idea that we're not there to be the superstar of the arena. The idea of good coaching is that the coach should become obsolete and ultimately disappear. So you have to start that from day one and get the kids used to from day one that they're leading their own learning.
Yep. No,
so
I like that idea.
That's what I think about coach them, don't teach them.
Yeah, and I think there's lots of ideas when you're teaching that you become obsolete. Basically, and in a job, if you get an assistant, you teach the assistant what you know so that you can progress on to a higher role because they can take over from you.
Yep, exactly.
Now, good frame of reference to evaluate your training and to measure skill growth. How would you explain that?
I suppose anyone who's heard any of my chats before knows that this appears in every single chat, because I suppose the biggest thing is to make kids understand. Like, you can teach any idiot to move a horse around the arena, kicking it and pulling it and doing whatever. But the biggest thing is that they have to understand the underlying training principles. People say that, oh, they're too young to hear that. But you just give it to them on the level. So I use sort of 4 systems that I use for evaluating the training. So we have William Mickham's constants, which are acceptance, calmness, forwardness, straightness, and purity. William Mickham's variables, which are direction, speed, impulsion, balance, and timing. The German scale of training, which is rhythm, suppleness, contact, impulsion, straightness, and collection. And the ABC, or Exercitation Science International principles, which are basic attempt, obedience, rhythm, straightness, contact, and proof. And again, all my kids from a very, very young age will start learning about these. And, what I'll do is I'll go through, say, the constants and variables one week, and then I might not come back to them for a week or two, and then it becomes something I can ask the question, oh, do you remember when we did those constants? What were they and why were they important or whatever? Or do you remember when we did those variables? Remember we talked about the German scale training? We've got our dressage tests coming up at the end of the term. So what are those, and why are they important? And when the judge writes, oh, your rhythm was very good, what does that mean? And all that sort of thing. So I suppose it's really good to bring that in really early. Obviously, like, you have to be able to go and stop and turn and stuff before you start into that sort of thing too much. But it's really important that we prepare them to go forward. Like, what I always think of it is I must be the worst nightmare if the kids move on to someone else, because I like to think that all my kids leave with so much more knowledge than other kids, that there's a foundation there, and I suppose that's really important to me. Yep.
Okay, now, kids, and I know they can't take big responsibilities, but what sort of responsibility? I suppose it depends on the age. What sort of responsibilities do you give them, and what age? Why you'd give a 5-year-old different to a 10-year-old or something like that?
Well, to be honest, I don't think the responsibilities are that different. No matter whether you're going out to compete 5-star eventing or whether you're going to, walk down the road. I suppose the big thing is, in this current world, and certainly the way parenting seems to have gone, I think it's very easy that for the parent to say sort of, look, I'm in control of everything. And like, there's a question I used to always ask kids when they first came, which was, oh, do you have to clean your room? And it's how I explain what I call 3-part rule. So I asked them, oh, do you have to clean your room? And I'd say about 50% of kids now say, oh, no, mum does that, or dad does that.
Okay.
And whereas when I asked that when I started teaching 10 years ago, sure, everyone has to clean the room. So that's the way I suppose I explain how we have a gradient of pressure with horses. I know I'm going a bit off topic, but anyway. So when mum asks you to clean your room the first time, it's, oh, please will you go clean your room, Mary? Second time she asks, it's probably a bit more like, Mary, go clean your room. And then the third time she asks, it'll be, Mary, clean your room. And I suppose it's to show kids that they have responsibilities at home. They have the same responsibilities with horses. It's just a different set of things. So the way I teach them is that there's 4 things that every rider must do. The first thing is they have to look where they're going and have a plan about where they're going. And that's number one. Number two is they have to decide on what speed they're going to go for that task.
Yes.
Number three is direction. They have to make sure they communicate to the horse what direction they're to go. And then the final thing is they have to have a position and balance that's going to allow them to give those instructions. Because, you have to explain to kids at the very start that, the horses don't understand our words necessarily. What they understand is where we're sitting, where our leg moves, because it's all about touch. I was just at the British Horse Society National Convention. I was actually presenting at it last Sunday.
Yes.
And Yogi Breisner was there, who I'm sure anyone who's involved in eventing has heard of. And he was talking so much about how we communicate with the horses. So he asked, the first question he said is, what is the primary method we use for communicating with the horses? And it took a long time, but eventually we came out with, touch.
Yeah.
He said, yeah. So we touch them. What's the primary method we use when we deal with children? And again, he came up with this, and it's touch. When a child is crying, the first thing they do is get a cuddle.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it's we've got to remember that going through that. It's all about putting ourselves in the right place to create the right circumstances so the horse can do the right thing.
I like that. Say that again. It's all about putting ourselves in the right place.
The right place to create the right circumstances for the horse to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Like, how many times do you stand there watching someone trying to load a horse into a float, and and they're in the way. They're standing on the ramp trying to pull the horse in. You've got to get out of the way. So, like, all my horses learn to cast in because they just cast in. Even the most difficult loader can learn to cast in, and probably much better than if you're standing in the way.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I learned from Andrew is, you can't stand right in front of them, expect them to come up to the trailer when you're the big scary man with the big stick. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yep. Okay, talk about underestimating young clients. And I obviously just did, because I said what sort of different responsibilities between a 5-year-old and 10-year-old or an adult. But tell me what you mean when you say don't underestimate young clients.
Yeah, well, just to backtrack for a second. So, sorry, I actually didn't make that link for the, like, with those rider responsibilities. If you're 8 and learn to walk around the arena, you've got to look around. You've got to look at your pathway.
Yep.
Whereas if you're a 5-star eventer and you're coming down to a big massive trainer, you bloody well better look at it and know exactly the pathway in and the pathway out. Speed, again, you're 8, you're learning to walk around the arena, you're walking slowly. When you're coming down to a double of elbows, going 5-star, you're going to have to ease the pace back a bit, and then when you land after the second elbow, you're going to have to canter on and get up to 600 meters per minute because you won't make the time otherwise.
Yep.
Direction, if you're telling them to go to E to B, from the very start, E to B should be E to B, not near E, not near B.
Yep.
In the same way as if you're coming down to a skinny that's, a metre wide, if you don't have the horse between those flags, then you got 20 penalties straight off.
Yep.
Position and balance. Biggest thing kids do is they lean forward. It can happen a lot of eventing as well, that the body comes too far forward. It's something that I'm working on with my trainer at the moment. She's got me holding the neck strap and pulling on the neck strap to try and get myself sat up a bit straighter to give the horse the support. So it's exactly the same skills, whether you're going 5-star or whether you're going, 0-star. Do you know what I mean? Anyway,
Yes.
So don't underestimate younger clients, as that is the next one. So I think that instructors can get, and I use the word instructors in this case, can get very lazy with young clients that they think that, they're going nowhere anyway.
Yep.
I suppose one of the things I do with all our kids from when they start, whether they're a bibbly bobbly beginneroo, all the way up to whatever they're doing in our term lessons, which are our group lessons, is they all work towards doing a dressage test at the end of term, and it'll show jump at the end of term. Now, when you're a beginnery, you're doing a very simple walk trot test, and I'm there to help them if they get lost or whatever. But it's a huge deal for them to do that. But it's really important that they do that sort of thing. And same way as the more advanced clients, you give them less support. But they're all still, their learning is equally important. I think when you step into the arena, it's really easy to be enthusiastic with someone who's out jumping over 90 centimeters, or they're going out to their first event. It's really exciting. You want to teach them, you want to help them, you want to coach them, you want to get them all prepared. But you should be just as excited and see the learning as just as important when they're a beginner.
Yes.
Like I've always said it. Like when I was learning to teach, I was taught to teach by a lady called Joanne Logue, and what Joanne said is, there's no point in a beginner instructor teaching beginners. Who should be teaching beginners is the most advanced instructor in the place, who can install those basic skills that will bring them airborne. Whereas anyone can safely teach a more advanced client, because they're not going to fall off. They're not going to get injured. They've got basic skills and stuff there. The only problem is the advanced client doesn't want to be taught by the beginner instructor.
I was just going to say that there's a bit of a principle here where yes, if
there's a disconnect.
Yes,
there's
absolutely.
A disconnect between the ideal for one thing and the ideal for the next. But it's more, I think, instructors beyond, or coaches beyond a certain level are very quick to dismiss. Oh, you just go and teach that one. Whereas I actually love teaching the beginners, because, like, I have 3 groups of kids that I've taught from 0 upwards. And they might not be the most stylish in the world because they're only riding once a week, but they really get what they're trying to do. And when things go wrong, like if a horse stops or runs out, they don't panic. They know exactly what they're supposed to do, and they just do it. And it's so rewarding. Like, if any of them ever do get horses and go forward, there's going to be a joy to teach for anybody, because they're gutsy, because they understand what they're doing. Like, if a horse stops, they know the horse has to stay there until I tell them what to do.
Yep.
And then we flatten the fence, or we rein them back, or whatever we do. But by giving them, making them responsible, like when they're doing a 20-meter circle, it's a 20-meter circle. It's not an egg. It's nothing else. So I suppose I think it's just really important that every client is important. And that we really coach everyone.
Yes. Now, the next thing you talked about is to break exercises into simple, achievable components, and we've talked about that a bit. But what's an example that you'd use, that if the child wants to do something, how are you going to break that down for them?
Okay, so I suppose, to sidetrack for a second, I think that as riding coaches, we massively underuse equipment.
Okay.
Simple, really good equipment. So you go and watch kids being trained for football, and they have the little flat cones, and they have to dribble the ball in and out, whatever, and do all that sort of stuff. Whereas we only ever use poles, wings, or blocks. So that's all we use. But poles, wings, and blocks are kind of a bit crap, because the horse can see them. The horse pays attention. The rider's horse is kind of half know, oh, geez, we go outside those yokes. So I think it's really important to use, like I use little flat football cones all the time. So
is that what you call pods?
Yeah, pods.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Little flat yokes. And I use them for 20-meter circles. I use them for changes of rein. I use them for corners. I use them for everything. So you can make a really good lesson out of riding into the corners, and all you need is 8 of those little flat pods. So what I do is I'll put a pod going into the corner and a pod going out of the corner. And the job is that the kids have to go outside the pods, between the fence and the pods or whatever. Yogi was using poles for the same job at the convention last week, and it's just such a great idea to use equipment. And he did great stuff with poles, and it was all about teaching people to turn, and he had them coming in and out of trot poles in different ways, and it was just amazing to see him develop the skills of the eventer in really riding club riders. So I suppose it's about breaking everything down. So, for example, one of the first things the kids learn to do is they learn to stop and they learn to start. And then they learn to trot. And then after that, they sit there in this big abyss of just learning to do the rising trot. And that's all they do.
Mm-hmm.
Then they get bored out of their face doing it.
Yep.
So if you go, right, you're going to do rising trot, but you're going to have to go through these pods. If you miss these pods, you're going to have to get off and do 10 jumping jacks. It turns into a game, and they're totally engaged in it. So, like, you know, even my bibbly bobbly kids, they have to go to the corners. And, you know, things like we for dressage week or flat work week, we set out a dressage arena.
Mm-hmm.
And they then have to get the horse between the pod and the pole, because we use poles. We don't use the plastic guttering that lots of people use, but we keep very simple. And it's more, if you just give them small bits to do as they go along. Like, for example, this term was all about centre lines. So in week 1 of doing centre lines, we had pods, and they had to ride through 5 sets of pods up the centre line. Week 2, you take away, second week you're doing centre lines, you have them circle off that centre line and back onto it, and you have them do that 3 times going up it. And then the third week of doing centre lines, you take away the pods. So we're doing different exercises, but they're all for the same purpose. Yeah. I think it's important to have enough insight to look ahead and go, what are we coaching today? Are we looking after look and plan? Are we looking after speed? Are we looking after direction? Are we looking after turn? Are we on the basic attempt level with this person? Are we on the obedience level? Are we on the rhythm level? Are we on the straightness level? And that's where having the different frames of reference can show you where you're at, to see how simple you've got to break it down. And I think it's not to be afraid to make things extremely simple. Richard Raygood was at this convention as well, and he was teaching some like high performance people, but the simplicity of the exercise he used was incredible, and the technical content that he put into that simple exercise was amazing. I think we have to remember that with young clients and older clients, advanced clients, beginner clients. They all need the simplicity and clarity, because you have to remember as well, horses are not built to work things out. Yep. They're built to form habits. Mm-hmm. Riders, we like to think we're fantastically super intelligent, but we're really not that smart. Like, look at us, we're slaves to working and economy and whatever, whereas you look at the horse in the field, they're smarter than all of us. They have the food served up to them every day. Yep. They have to work for 1 hour every day. You know, we have to remember, keep it simple.
Yep. Yep. Now, competition, you know, thinking about equestrian sport, competition, teaching children, how can we put all that together, teaching children to learn effectively? Yeah.
Okay, I suppose the big thing I always think of is that, you know, this is, for me anyway,
yep.
I think for lots of parents see horse riding as an activity, whereas it's not just an activity. So horse riding is an activity, but football is sport. And I think it's really important to make every lesson competition relevant and to work towards competition goals. So I mentioned that we do little in-house competitions. Now, the kids are not competing against each other, really. It's just more the idea that they have to work towards a goal or the development of specific skills or whatever. So what I tell all our kids to do is, you know, we have 3 terms that they do. So that means they've got 3 dressage tests. So I ask them to keep their dressage tests from the first term, the second term, and the third term, and to look back on them and go, was there an area that they did really well in? Was there an area they would wish to improve? Was there an area they did really well in? And can they see where they need to improve? And I think that's what competition does.
Yep.
Is it should be about your personal improvement.
Now, how do you get them to understand the idea of their personal best, or personal improvement and then personal best?
So what I always ask them when they've done, say for example, like centre lines is the big thing this term. So I try and pick a theme every term. So This term was about riding centre lines, and you map that over into your jumping work. So all the lines we were working on this term were sort of related distancy lines, maybe a few bending lines, and it's all about keeping the horse straight. So what you do is, or what I do is, I ask them when they're doing their individual work on the centre line, you ask them, well, what would you give that centre line out of 10? invariably the youngest kids will say, oh, I give it a 10 because they don't know any better.
Sure.
So you ask them, well, is there anything you could do better? Oh, yeah, I could do this. So 10 means it's perfect. And they'll go, okay, maybe it's an 8. And usually what I'm trying to do is I'm always trying to negotiate them down to a 7. Because 7's a really good place to put a child. And you explain to them, explain to them coming up to the dressage test that if we get 70%, we're extremely happy. Because 70% is pretty much as good as we're going to do. 60%, we're still happy. So I use the traffic light system. So, red is 0 to 3. Orange is 4 to 6. Green is 7 to 10. So I try to explain to them that, we want to be in the green zone, but if we're in the orange zone, it's not too bad. If we're in the red zone, we're in trouble. Yeah. And if you explain to them that idea, that they're always trying to get at least a 7, then they start to rethink about how well they're doing. And same thing in jumping. You make it that it's not about the jumping, it's about look and plan, speed, direction, and position. Because especially when they're young and they're going over stepping over a tiny little crossbow, oftentimes the horses will walk. And in a way, thank God they do, because sometimes the kids would bimble off if they actually even ambled over it and tried.
Yes.
But it's still, for that child, it's a huge achievement that the horse walked over the tiny crossbow. Like, instructors can be standing there looking at them going, oh my God, for God's sake, you are just rubbish. I hate teaching you, hopefully inside their head. But you have to tell them that they're brilliant because they did exactly what they were told to do. Yep. They got the horse over the thing. So I suppose that's what I do, and I think of personal bests. And, it's really easy to switch off teaching, particularly beginners, because they don't bring much to the table. You have to bring everything.
Yep. No, I get that. Yeah. Now, you ask them lots of questions. What sort of questions?
Okay, so again, this repeats back to the idea of coaching.
Yep.
It's really easy to stand there and talk, says the man who won't shut up. But anyway, you have to ask them questions about, one of my big questions is, we'll have a jumping exercise set out, and I'll ask them, so what are we doing today? Have a look. What do you see? And again, when you start off with the young kids, they're like, oh, I see a red pole, I see a yellow pole, I see a blue pole, or whatever. But you see, as they progress on, they'll go say things like, oh, are we going from the red to the blue on a bending line? That's one of the ways I start off asking questions. What do you think we're going to do? What are the pods there for? Why is there a pod over there? And it just gets them thinking. And again, it puts them in charge of their own learning. And then you ask them as they're going along, oh, how did that go? I think how did that go is one of those cop-out questions that lots of coaches, especially young, when they're starting out, ask as a cop-out. And I think you have to be, if you're going to ask them how did that go, you have to have an idea of how you think that went, and lead them with questions to what you think they should be aware of. So it happens that I've got a few younger pony club eventers that come, and you ask them how they go, and they'll say things like, oh yeah, it went well, I got over it. But when I'm coaching them, it's not good enough that they got over it. Yeah. They have to have got over it, gone down straight, and halted where I told them to. And it takes them a while, but once they get that idea that it's not about the jump, suddenly the change in their competition work is stark. It's unbelievable the change that can happen if you can ask them questions and bring them to the idea of what they should be doing.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. And this, if you've got riders that are riding once a week, so it's not quite like a rider that's out and they've got a few horses and you give them a bit of work in between. If they're only riding once a week, what sort of homework can you give them?
So for my once a week people, I do a few things. So my principle of what I do is I throw resources at people.
Yep.
And that means that with a bit of luck, some of the resources might get used. So we do, for our dressage weeks, I do a sheet which has diagrams of what we're doing. I do, there's a few little words on it, a few little bits of information on it. Most people don't look at it, but it's there. So that's one thing you can do. I used to give it as paper handouts, but you used to find that they'd be left in the coffee room or whatever. So I stopped doing that. And I'm not destroying the planet for people to not learn. Anyway, so that's one thing you do.
So how do you give them the diagrams then?
They're on the website.
Yeah.
So we've got a learning page on the website, and they can click in and look at them. I think most people don't bother, but that's okay. I can live with that. It's there.
It's there. It's there for the one or two that do. Yep.
Exactly. Then you can do things like, most kids over here certainly ride a bike. So you go, right, when you're riding your bike, I want you to turn your head. Simple things like that. Turn your head and look before you turn. And you can see the kids that go and do it, because there's lots of kids that will go and do that. They're like, oh, great, I can ride my bike, pretend to ride my horse. And if you can integrate that into their work, other things I'll have them do is, when you go up the stairs, stop on the bottom step for a minute and put your knees over your toes and put your heels down. And again, you have to give these things with very low expectation of return. But again, it's like you said, for those one or two kids that do it, it's great.
Yeah.
Because some kids, my wife's always reminded me, remember, for you, this is every day. Like we're doing it every day. It's great. Whereas this is these kids, it's their whole world. It's what their whole week builds up to.
Yep.
And if you can give them an integration into their daily life that makes them feel they're working towards their passion, that's brilliant. And that's what we try to do.
Okay.
We did for a while. We did videos, but unfortunately, it just became too time consuming. We used to do like a pre-video each week for doing for whatever exercise it was. I'd get someone in and we do it, but we just don't have the time to do it anymore. Unfortunately, it was a great idea, but we just didn't have the time to do it.
Sometimes it's good, the first time of the term of a session, like 10 sessions or something, and then at the end of 10 sessions. Yeah. Now, this 2 stars and a wish, you've talked about it before, and I'm sure if people would like to listen, they can go back and just go to horsechats.com and search for Brendan with an A or Bergin, and just go there and talk about 2 stars and a wish. But just to keep people on track, tell us again about the 2 stars and a wish and why it's so beneficial.
Okay. Again, it's one of those things that, again, people are probably bored to hell of hearing, because there's a lot of repetition in what I have to say, but I have everyone, whether they're working towards an eventing goal, whether they're a beginner rider, or even for me, I have a little book. I write down my stars and my wishes. So a star is a skill that has improved. So, for example, I start them off and they give me a small star. So a small star might be, I kept my heels down.
Yep.
Okay. And then a wish is something they wish they had done better, or something they could do better. So they can't wish that they were taller or anything like that. It's got to be some kind of a skill. So, like, I wish I was able to keep Billy straighter after the jump, because oftentimes with young kids, like that, on that idea is, Billy goes over the jump and then Billy immediately turns and the kid nearly falls off, and they go, oh my God, I wish I could stay on, or I wish I didn't nearly fall off. And you go, well, what could you have done differently? Because not falling off is a pretty crap wish. So you lead them to the idea that the wish should be, I wish I could keep Billy straighter.
Yep.
Okay. And then the last thing I always do is I ask them to do a big star. What was the big star of which you did today? Oh, I was straight all the way up before the fence. And I just have everyone do that. And I do it. I write down my stars and my wish. And what's great is that if you look back after, they're not allowed to look back. You don't look back for 6 weeks. But if you look back in 6 weeks and see where you were and see how your stars and wishes have developed, you'll be amazed actually how much progress you made that you didn't really know that you made. So that's why I do my stars and wishes. And it was actually one of the kids brought the idea to me from school. Oh, all right, my teacher does this. And I went, oh, hang on a minute, that's a really good idea. And now I just do it with everyone, adults, kids, the whole lot.
I think just as a habit, the 2 stars and a wish, it keeps them a bit more focused during the lesson, because they're thinking about what they have to come up with at the end of the lesson. So they're more focused about, this was good, this could be improved.
Yeah, and it's also, it keeps it very positive, because as soon as you start thinking of stars and wishes, there's an element of magic to it.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
what do you need to work on always sounds like, look, what did you do kind of crap. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And what went well is always the thing that instructors and coaches always have as the back burner thing.
Yeah.
So it's what went well and what you need to work on. So the person leaves thinking, I need to work on something. Whereas you want them to leave going, superstar, this is my star. Yeah. Here's my other star. But there was also something to work on in the middle.
Yeah.
So I suppose that's the way I think about when we're trying to help children learn effectively. They're different from adults, but we've got to treat them the same in a similar kind of way.
Yes, and I think that magical 2 stars and a wish, it's a lot better than the sandwich feedback.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Brendan, wonderful talking to you. I can tell you've got lots and lots of tricks up your sleeve about teaching children to learn effectively, because lots and lots of experience. And I think from that experience, from that passion, you've been able to bring together a really good chat for us today.
Thank you very much.
And I'm very much looking forward to chatting with you again very soon.
Thanks, Glenys.
Okay.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
If you've enjoyed this chat, then please comment, rate and subscribe. If you'd like any changes or recommendations for guests, then please contact us through horsechats.com. And while you're online, have a look at the government-accredited courses at internationalhorsecollege.com. Registered Training Organisation 31352.
Remember that our comments and instructions are general in nature and do not take into consideration your individual horses or your individual ability and circumstances. If you enjoyed this podcast, then please leave your comment below.